So it's been about 5 weeks since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Now, according to the UN, at least 4 million people have fled the country. Some 6 million others remain trapped within the country's borders. Only 3 humanitarian corridors were opened today. So let's just get the very latest coming to us from Ukraine. I'm joined now by UNICEF spokesperson, communications chief for UNICEF South Africa, Toby Fricker. Toby, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, let's focus on the cities that are of greatest concern in Ukraine currently from a humanitarian point of view. We've been hearing for days now about Mariupol and the food supply. What is the latest on that and other cities?
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me and having UNICEF on. I mean, we're extremely concerned, obviously, about the situation in cities like Mariupol and other cities like Chernihiv and others, where children are essentially trapped. You know, in the cities, food is running short, the water supplies have been cut and power cut. And that is obviously an extremely traumatic situation, extremely dangerous for every child in that situation. I actually met a 13-year-old called Christina the other day at Lviv railway station who managed to get out of Kherson with her family. And you can only imagine the trauma that they've been through. So it's extremely concerning. What we're trying to do is provide, psychosocial support as quickly as we can to children who can escape and who do get out. But obviously the concern is for those families who are still stuck in some of those areas.
So let's talk about how children process this kind of trauma. I would imagine it's age dependent. Do children take it harder than adults, or are they more accepting, or does it absolutely depend on the child?
Well, I mean, I think you can imagine that anyone who has a child can imagine the horrors of being with your child underground, trying to stay safe. Women, mothers who have been sort of shielding their children from the horrors of war. And it's extremely traumatic for every child who goes through that, who's exposed to that. But even children here in Lviv, where I am, in the west of Ukraine, which is relatively safer, but there's still air raid sirens every few hours, children going down into bunkers. There are women giving birth in bunkers, in maternity wards, not just here, but in other areas across the country, and it's extremely traumatic. And I think, the hope is that children are resilient. And if we can provide the psychosocial, psychological support as quickly as we can, that there is a hope that they can recover, that we can help to sort of nurture that recovery over time. But it's both immediate and long-term, and has a long-term impact on both mental but also physical well-being.
I mean, there's so many reasons why this invasion has to end as quickly as possible. For kids, they're going to be missing schooling as well. Now, I think there are some efforts to get some sort of school structure going, but long-term, that could be a massive problem. Is UNICEF involved in that part of the issues as well?
That's right. No, I mean, education's a massive problem. The schools shut over a month ago now. On the plus side, we have been speaking to children who are going back online. So there is a curriculum online. Some of that was set up, of course, because of COVID. And now it's being sort of reinstigated. And children are trying to connect online. Those who are displaced, those who have connection and data are being able to learn again. And some teachers are connecting in to conduct schooling. So that's extremely promising in that children can get back learning, but also for children who are moving on the move, for the 2 million children who have fled outside Ukraine, and quickly working with authorities, working with ministries of education to help them to get Ukrainian children into the systems.
Talk to me about the kids who are still stuck behind the front lines. We keep hearing about these humanitarian corridors, but they seem to be very patchy. They sometimes work, they're sometimes open, they're sometimes closed. What is your understanding of the food aid that is and isn't able to get through, and what the problems are with these corridors?
Yeah, it's extremely difficult. The humanitarian corridors really we're calling on basically all sides really to do what they can to provide safe access to supplies and to humanitarian relief. And some supplies have got into areas like Kharkiv. A couple of days ago, we had a convoy going in there. UNICEF provided some water supplies, meaning for infrastructure to make some simple repairs and to try and keep some of the systems running. But it's extremely difficult to get through in some of those areas. Very very dangerous, very challenging. And that's why we continue to advocate, we continue to call on all sides to provide that access, because children and women are there. Children and women are living there. They're trying to survive. They're trying to eat what they can. They're trying to stay warm despite the temperatures. And we really need to get that relief in there as quickly as we can.
You, of course, represent UNICEF South Africa. You're in Lviv. And obviously, this humanitarian catastrophe has happened in such a short space of time. It has called for the world to focus. As you say, there are 2 million children plus in distress. But, of course, here in South Africa, children are still starving to death. As UNICEF, how do you divvy up your energies, your resources, to make sure that your mandate, say, for example, in South Africa, is still held to?
Yeah, you're right. There are massive challenges, and you know, Ukraine is a huge crisis. The scale is massive, and it's happened so quickly. You know, within a month, almost just over a month, having so many people flee, so many children displaced within the country, and the aid that we need is huge. And in Ukraine, we've been very lucky. Donors have come forward, individuals have come forward, and we're trying to do what we can to use that as best we can to reach every child. And it's the same in South Africa. We're there to add value. We're there to do what we can to reach the most vulnerable children, and that goes across the world, from Syria to Yemen. The challenges are massive, but we can do what we can do to provide some support, particularly to the most vulnerable children.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us this evening. Toby Fricker, Communications Chief for UNICEF South Africa, is currently in Lviv in Western Ukraine.